Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Allah tells us in the Quran in Surah Al-Hujurat that He created us and divided us into nations and tribes so that we may get to know one another. My question to everyone is, what if you don't know yourself? And I don't mean you as an individual. I mean as a collective people. What if you don't know yourself? The African American has a very unique history. And from the time that we were brought here, we were stripped of our cultural identity. We were stripped of our language. We were stripped of our religion. We were stripped of our cultural mores, forays, our folk ways, things that were taboo. Cultural identity. We were stripped of who we were. As a result of that, since our time here in America, we have not been self-defining. Who we are as a people has been wholly controlled by exogenous forces. We have been defined by those other than ourselves. Many times demonized, vilified. Mass media, movies, proliferates and pushes and promotes negative images of us. We don't control our own narrative on a large scale as far as what's being put out in the media, what's being put out for us in the world, our image, how we are viewed. We don't really control that because we don't control mass media. And this is a problem. Through my travels, I've traveled to a lot of countries. And I've gotten some really strange questions, some very demeaning and degrading questions in reference to African Americans, who we are, our culture, the whole nine. I've gotten some very, I had an Egyptian brother, and I understand that he didn't know any better. And you have to ask yourself, where did he even learn this terminology? But he approached me one day and he said, "Akhi, can I ask you a question?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Tell me about the niggers in America." I've come into contact with Muslims in other countries. The first question, can I rap? Have I ever been to jail? Do I play basketball? This is because this is what they see of us. We don't control our own narrative. In 1971, Dr. William Cross created a racial identity model called negrescence. And negrescence breaks down the stages of development of racial identity. And he broke it down into 5 stages. And I won't get into the details of the stages right now. But the African American needs to get to the point of self-definition, of self-defining their own agency, controlling that narrative. As far as the African American Muslim is concerned, when we look at the African American Muslim, many of the pathologies, shortcomings that we had in the dunya, we bring with us into the ummah, into Islam. Lack of identity is one of them. When you see a brother who is connected to whatever group he connects himself to, he tends to take on the persona, the style of dress, the cuisine, sometimes the mannerisms of that group. When you see an African American who's attached to the Jamaat Tabligh, which is a group that comes out of India or that subcontinent area, he tends to dress as if he is from that area and eats the food or prefers the food of that area. He is connecting himself to a culture, because we as African Americans do not have a culture that extends to another land. We don't have a culture as a collective that extends past the borders of America, a culture that we can look to and say, this is ours. This is what we're supposed to be doing. This is our language. These are our cultural norms. This is where we developed a collective efficacy for the community. We don't have that. When a brother comes from Nigeria, who he is already determined. I can come and tell him all day he's X, Y, or Z, and he's going to say, no, I'm Nigerian, and this is what I am. A brother comes from Mexico, from China, from Russia, from Saudi Arabia, from Yemen. Doesn't matter. He has a self-identity. And no matter what you say, he knows who he is. He knows the food to eat. He knows the clothes to wear. He knows what's acceptable and what's not acceptable within his community, whether he's at home in his country or if he's here in America or if he goes to study in Saudi Arabia or wherever he goes. He has an identity. When I was in Singapore once, I went to the masjid, I prayed salah, and I fell asleep on the floor. When I woke up, there was a large Tablighi Jamaat in the masjid. They were Southeast Asian. As I walked by them, they gave me salams. I returned the salams. We began to talk, and that's when I found out they were Jamaat Tabligh. But what stuck out to me is that none of them were dressed like they were from Pakistan or India. They were all dressed like Southeast Asians. So if you saw them out, you wouldn't be able to say, oh, Jamaat Tabligh, oh, Pakistan, India. They were dressed like Southeast Asians. Why? Because they have their own culture, their own cultural identity. And this is something that we as African Americans many times tend to lack. As I mentioned before, William Cross, his negrescence model of developing racial identity is something that I'm looking at, using that framework and applying it to African American Muslims. I want to see how negrescence, the framework for it, can be used to aid Muslims, African American Muslims, to have their own identity. It is okay to be yourself. You don't have to be someone else. You don't have to dress like someone else. Someone will look at me and say, well, you're dressed like an Arab. Well, I lived in an Arab country. I lived in Kuwait. I've lived in Egypt. I've also been in Southeast Asia. So I wear clothes from all over the world, and I also wear Western style clothes. So I'm not locked into any one style of dress. I wear what makes me feel comfortable. I just left Salat al-Jumu'ah just now, so I have a thobe on. Alhamdulillah. I prefer this style of dress because I feel like it fits the sunnah for what a man should be wearing for the salah. But that's a personal preference. I'm not locked into any one style of dress. I'm comfortable in my own skin. But I wanted to sort of throw this out there and get some ideas. Do you agree with this? Does the African American as a whole, as well as the African American Muslim, need to focus on self-definition and controlling their own agency and stop allowing others to define us and tell us who we are? For the Muslim, we're less than a Muslim because we're not from this country or that country. That our Islam is subpar because we're not from here or not from there. And I think that sometimes we buy into that because we lack that confidence and lack that self-identity. So until we attach ourselves to somebody else looking for validation, we are less than. And I think this is a problem for us. Anyway, I'll leave that there. If you agree, please feel free to drop some lines. If you disagree, I want to hear that too, because I'm in the process of development right now. So the good and the bad, I accept it all. I read it all. Please, if you like this video, hit like, subscribe it, which is something I never ask people to do. In all the videos I've done, you've never heard me say, please subscribe. People tell me this is what you're supposed to say. So I'm going to roll with that. Subscribe the video or subscribe to the channel. If you like it, pass it on. I would like to get a lot of feedback to help me in how I'm going to attack this issue. Okay? I appreciate your time. Barakallahu feekum. Jazakum Allahu khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.